Welcome to my channel. Subscribe to the channel and listen to my stories every day. They say hindsight is 20/20, but I never thought it would be my marriage that needed examining. Sarah and I were the picture-perfect couple, or so I thought. We'd been together for 12 years, built a life, and made promises to each other that seemed unbreakable. But as I look back now, I realize the signs were there, faint at first, then glaringly obvious in a way only a blind man could miss. Yet, I ignored every one of them, thinking they were just bumps in the road. Our life together seemed normal: steady jobs, comfortable routines, weekend barbecues with friends, and the occasional vacation to reset. I believed I was living a life some people only dream about. Sarah had a job she was passionate about, working as a project manager for a high-profile firm. It demanded her time and attention, sure, but she always came home, and that was enough for me. I even admired her ambition and her drive, the way she threw herself into her work. I thought she was lucky to have something she loved doing every day. But something changed over the past few months. She began working late more often, claiming new projects were piling up, requiring her to stay at the office for hours. "Deadlines are tight, Daniel," she'd say, throwing on a casual smile that didn't reach her eyes. I wanted to believe her. In fact, I tried hard to believe her, brushing off the late nights and frequent business trips as part of her job. I remember a particular Thursday evening when I waited for her to come home from one of these work dinners. The house was quiet, with just the low hum of the fridge to keep me company. Midnight came and went, and when she finally slipped through the door, I forced a smile, trying not to look like I'd been waiting up for hours. She seemed surprised, almost caught off guard, and offered a quick kiss before slipping into the bedroom to change. As she walked past, the faint scent of cologne lingered, a scent that wasn't mine. I wanted to ask her about it, but the words got stuck in my throat. What kind of husband questions his wife every time she comes home late? I didn't want to be that guy, the paranoid one who assumes the worst. So I stayed quiet, telling myself it was probably nothing. But the gnawing feeling in my gut only grew over time. I'd wake up to her on her phone in the middle of the night, swiping through messages or browsing her emails. And while she'd claim it was work-related, the way she'd shield the screen from me set off alarms I could no longer ignore. My once loving wife was slipping away, becoming someone I barely recognized. It was as if we were living parallel lives under the same roof. Then came the moment that shattered every bit of trust one had in her. It was a Friday evening, and Sarah had left her phone on the counter while she went to take a shower. I tried to ignore it, focusing on making dinner, but then her phone lit up with a message. I wasn't going to read it, I really wasn't. But there it was, like a challenge, or a dare from fate. The preview on the screen read, "Can't wait to see you again tomorrow, baby." My heart pounded, and everything around me went numb. My hands trembled as I reached for the phone, desperately hoping there was an innocent explanation. I unlocked it, a skill she didn't know I had, and scrolled through the messages. His name was Nick, and from the messages, it was clear he was more than just a coworker. Each message felt like a stab, each word another betrayal. Plans for hotel meetups, intimate exchanges, and even little jokes about my cluelessness. They had been carrying on for months, maybe longer. Every detail in those messages painted a brutal picture of how blind I had been. I wanted to scream, throw something, confront her immediately. The betrayal was too raw, too overwhelming to keep bottled up. But somehow, I managed to put her phone back exactly as it was and walked out of the kitchen. I took a long, deep breath, trying to stop my hands from shaking. Anger filled my chest, mingling with shame and heartbreak, but I knew better than to let it explode right then and there. As I lay in bed that night, feigning sleep beside her, my mind ran through a dozen different confrontations, each more heated than the last. I wanted to wake her up, shove the evidence in her face, and demand answers. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that an immediate confrontation wouldn't be enough. This betrayal cut too deep to settle with a simple argument. No, if she had gone behind my back, humiliating me with another man, then she would pay for it. I needed time to come up with a plan, a way to make her feel the same pain, the same humiliation she had inflicted on me. The days that followed were agonizing. I went through the motions at work, my mind always returning to those messages, replaying every lie, every excuse she had given me. Each memory was tainted now, every happy moment painted over with the realization that it had all been a lie. But I couldn't let her know I knew, not yet. I needed to play my part, keep things normal until I had everything in place. So I became the perfect husband, the one she didn't deserve. I cooked dinner, cleaned the house, and listened patiently as she droned on about work, her words now sounding hollow to my ears. Every touch, every kiss felt like a betrayal, but I forced myself to stay calm. Inside, I was a storm, but outside, I was steady. She had no idea the reckoning that was coming. As I dug deeper, I began gathering everything I needed. I saved screenshots of messages, printed copies of transaction records, and even managed to get her phone records showing late-night calls to Nick. It was grueling, seeing the evidence pile up, but it was also satisfying in a twisted way. I was building my case, layer by layer, preparing for the day I would make her face the truth in front of everyone. The closer I got to my goal, the calmer I felt. My anger was still there, but it had turned cold, calculated. I no longer felt the urge to yell or throw things, I simply wanted her to pay for every bit of pain she had caused me. With the evidence in hand, my next step was planning my move. It wasn't enough for me to confront Sarah privately, that would let her off too easily. No, I wanted the truth out in the open. She needed to face the people who trusted her, who thought of her as some perfect, loving wife, while she sneaked around, making me the fool. I wanted her to feel exposed, humiliated, exactly as I had when I discovered her betrayal. I mulled over my options, pacing the house like a caged animal. I couldn't talk to friends or family about it yet, Sarah was close to everyone I knew. The shame of what was happening was still too raw, too painful to share with others. I had to keep it to myself until the right moment. Then, as if fate had intervened, Sarah's birthday came up on the calendar. She hadn't mentioned any plans yet, so I decided I'd be the one to organize something. I brought it up at breakfast one morning, trying to sound upbeat. "So, your birthday's next week. How about we throw a party?" Her face lit up with excitement. "Really? You don't mind?" "Of course not," I said, hiding the bitterness that wanted to break through. "It'll be fun. We can invite some friends and family, have a little celebration. You deserve it." She agreed, and I could tell she was already making plans in her head, probably about which friends she wanted to invite, what she'd wear. She had no idea this party would be her undoing. I spent the following week making arrangements, organizing everything down to the smallest detail. I called our closest friends, family, even her parents. Everyone agreed to come, and most of them expressed admiration for throwing a surprise party for her. The irony didn't escape me, but I kept my face neutral, allowing them to believe I was simply the devoted husband. I even went so far as to hire a caterer, set up decorations, and order a cake. All the while, I kept my anger in check, channeling it into perfecting my plan. I couldn't help but think back on our life together as I worked. My mind wandered to memories I had once cherished, the vacations we took, the quiet evenings we spent cooking together, the way she laughed at my bad jokes. They all felt tainted now, like cheap props in a poorly rehearsed play. I'd thought we were happy, that we had something real. But her betrayal poisoned those memories, and each one became a reminder of how blind I'd been. She had fooled me, and I had let her. The night before the party, I lay awake beside her, watching her sleep. She looked peaceful, innocent even, but I knew better. I wondered how she'd managed to hide it so well. Every moment spent with me, every "I love you" she'd whispered, it had all been a lie. For months, she had been seeing him, lying to me with a straight face. It was almost impressive, the level of deceit she had reached. In the morning, I could feel the adrenaline pumping through my veins. This was it, the day she would finally see the truth she'd been hiding from herself. I went through my morning routine as usual, making coffee, reading the paper, keeping my expression calm as if today was any other day. She seemed excited about the party, even gave me a quick kiss as she headed out for some last-minute shopping. Once she left, I took a deep breath and laid everything out, the screenshots, the bank statements, the records of late-night calls, each piece of evidence in a neat stack. I placed the pile inside a small, leather-bound album, a cruel homage to the anniversary albums we used to make. I wanted her to open it in front of everyone, to let them see each lie for themselves. I even printed out a message from Nick where he called me a clueless husband. That one stung the most, but it also fueled my determination. By the end of the night, Sarah's web of lies would be laid bare. The party began that evening with laughter and drinks. People greeted Sarah warmly, each one oblivious to the spectacle about to unfold. She looked beautiful, wearing a dress I'd bought her years ago, flashing her practiced smile for every guest. I caught her stealing glances my way, almost as if she was grateful for all the trouble I'd gone through to make this night special. The absurdity of it all made me sick, but I managed to smile, nodding and playing along. Throughout the evening, I moved between guests, shaking hands, making small talk, watching as everyone celebrated a woman they didn't really know. My friends laughed and reminisced about old memories, and her family praised her as a kind, loving wife. They all seemed genuinely happy for her, proud even. Every word of praise made the weight in my chest grow heavier. Soon, they would see the truth behind the facade. Finally, as people were settling in, I cleared my throat, tapping a glass to get everyone's attention. The room quieted, and I felt Sarah's eyes on me, probably thinking I was about to give a heartfelt toast. "Thank you all for being here tonight," I started, forcing myself to smile. "It's so wonderful to see so many friends and family gathered to celebrate Sarah's birthday." She smiled back at me, looking a bit touched, unaware of the storm coming her way. I wanted to take a moment to recognize Sarah, who has been by my side for 12 wonderful years. I paused, letting the tension build. I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to share something special with all of you, a little album I made just for her. Her eyes flickered with curiosity as I handed her the leather-bound album, her fingers brushing mine as she took it. I stepped back, giving her room as she opened it in front of everyone. For a moment, she seemed touched, probably expecting photos or love notes. But as she turned the first page, her expression faltered. I watched as the color drained from her face, her hands trembling as she flipped through the pages. The screenshots of text messages with Nick, bank statements, the photos of hotel receipts, each page told the story of her betrayal in brutal detail. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with horror, and then glanced around the room, aware that every single person was watching. The silence was heavy, and I could feel everyone's shock ripple through the room. People exchanged confused, horrified glances, and her parents looked at each other, stunned. The whispers started almost immediately, a murmur of disbelief and anger building in the crowd. I felt a twisted satisfaction watching her world crumble in front of everyone she cared about. I held her gaze as she closed the album, her hands shaking, her eyes pleading. But I felt nothing. No sympathy, no remorse, only the cold satisfaction of seeing her finally face the consequences of her choices. In the stunned silence that followed, I cleared my throat once more. "I thought everyone deserved to know the truth," I said, my voice calm and steady. "Happy birthday, Sarah." A thick, tense silence hung in the room, broken only by Sarah's shaky breaths. She clutched the album to her chest, her face pale, her eyes darting between me and the stunned crowd. I watched her, unfeeling, as she tried to compose herself, but there was no easy way to cover up the disaster that had just unfolded in front of everyone we knew. Some guests stood frozen, unable to process what they'd just seen. Her parents looked horrified, her mother's hand covering her mouth in shock, her father's face twisted in a mixture of anger and shame. I could see the betrayal etched on their faces. They hadn't known either. No one had. Sarah's well-crafted lie had deceived us all. She tried to speak, but no words came, only a choked gasp as she glanced desperately around the room. Is this real? Her mother finally managed, her voice cracking. Sarah, what is this? I felt a sick satisfaction seeing Sarah squirm, her gaze dropping to the floor, her grip tightening around the album. She looked like a trapped animal, desperate for an escape, but there was none. Not this time. A friend of ours, Janet, finally spoke up. Sarah, is it true? She asked, her voice laced with disappointment and disbelief. You've been cheating on Daniel? Sarah looked up, her eyes brimming with tears, but she couldn't meet anyone's gaze. Instead, she directed her eyes at me, as if somehow I could save her from the wreckage she had created. Daniel, please, can we talk about this, privately? She whispered, her voice barely audible. But I shook my head. Privately? I repeated, my voice louder than hers. You didn't care about privacy when you betrayed me. When you snuck around with Nick, lying to my face every day. Don't you dare ask for privacy now. My words cut through the silence, and I saw her flinch. She clutched the album even tighter, her knuckles white. For a moment, I thought she might drop it, might crumble right there in front of everyone. She looked around the room, maybe hoping someone would defend her, offer her comfort, but no one moved. Everyone was too stunned to speak, too hurt by her deception. The whispers started again, louder this time. People glanced at each other, processing what had just happened, piecing together the fragments of Sarah's double life. I could feel the tension building, could see the disappointment and betrayal etched on the faces of her friends, her family, her parents. They had trusted her, believed in her just as I had. And she had let them down, deceiving them as easily as she had deceived me. At last, her father, Jack, stepped forward, his face a mask of barely contained rage. Sarah, he said, his voice low and dangerous, what on earth have you done? Sarah shook her head, tears spilling over. Dad, I made a mistake, she stammered, her voice trembling. I never meant for it to go this far. I was just a mistake. Jack's voice rose, his anger spilling over. This is more than a mistake, Sarah. You've hurt everyone in this room. How could you do this to Daniel? To us? He gestured at the room, at the stunned crowd of friends and family who had come to celebrate her, only to witness her humiliation. She looked down, defeated, her shoulders slumping under the weight of her shame. I watched her, waiting, wondering if she'd try to explain herself, to offer some excuse for what she had done. But instead, she remained silent, her head bowed, as if acknowledging that there was nothing she could say to fix this. Her mother stepped forward, her face a mixture of sadness and anger. Sarah, she said softly, we raised you better than this. The words seemed to cut through Sarah, and she let out a quiet sob, but I felt no pity. She deserved every bit of the shame she was feeling. This was the truth, laid bare for all to see. This was the price of betrayal. I took a step forward, closing the distance between us, and met her gaze. Did you think you'd get away with it? I asked, my voice cold. Did you think I'd never find out? That you could lie to me, to everyone, and just carry on with him behind my back? She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Her face crumpled, her shoulders shaking as the weight of her lies finally came crashing down. Seeing her broken, in the very state she had put me in, was oddly satisfying. I had spent countless nights racked with pain, wondering where I went wrong, questioning every moment we'd shared. But now, finally, it was her turn to face the agony of betrayal. Daniel, she said, her voice a whisper, barely audible over the murmurs of the crowd. I never meant to hurt you. I was confused. Things got out of control. I let out a bitter laugh. Out of control. I repeated. This wasn't some mistake, Sarah. You lied to me every single day. You lied to all of us. Her face fell, her gaze dropping to the floor again, and I felt an odd sense of release, like a weight I had carried for months was finally lifting. I had seen enough, heard enough. I was done. Without another word, I turned away from her, making my way through the crowd. I could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on me, could hear the whispers as people watched me go, as they processed the reality of what had just happened. But I didn't care. I was free now, free from the lies and the deceit. As I reached the door, I heard her call after me, her voice pleading. Daniel, wait. Please, don't leave like this. But I didn't stop. I kept walking, refusing to look back, refusing to give her the satisfaction of my attention. I stepped outside, the cool night air hitting me like a splash of water, refreshing and grounding. For a moment, I just stood there, breathing in deeply, feeling the reality of my newfound freedom settle around me. I was finally free from her lies, from the life she had forced me to live, a life built on a foundation of deceit. I didn't know where I was going or what I would do next, but I knew one thing for sure, I was done with her. I was done with the lies, the betrayal, the heartache. From this moment on, I would live my life for myself, free from the chains of a marriage that had become a prison. Behind me, the party continued, or at least the aftermath of it. I could hear muffled voices, people talking, shouting, probably questioning how it had all come to this. And then, finally, I heard her voice, calling my name, her footsteps coming closer. But I didn't turn around. I didn't answer. I simply walked away, leaving her to face the consequences of her actions, to live with the shame of her betrayal, just as I had lived with the pain of it for so long. The sound of her voice grew fainter as I walked, each step taking me further from the nightmare I had lived, closer to the life I would now build for myself. She had betrayed me, humiliated me, but she no longer had any hold over me. I was free. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the weight of that freedom settle around me, steady and reassuring. In the end, revenge hadn't tasted sweet. It was bitter, laced with the sadness of a love that had been destroyed. But it was also necessary. The days after the party felt surreal. I stayed with an old friend from college, crashing on his couch, piecing myself back together from the wreckage of the night. I hadn't heard from Sarah since, and I preferred it that way. I wanted distance, space to heal and maybe, in time, to forget. Friends and family who had been at the party messaged me, asking questions, expressing shock and disbelief. I replied sparingly, choosing to keep to myself. I wanted nothing to do with the whispers, the gossip, the endless rehashing of that painful night. A week later, I went back to the house to gather my things, hoping Sarah wouldn't be there. But as I parked in front of our home, I saw her car in the driveway, and a jolt of irritation ran through me. I didn't want to see her. I didn't want her to see me like this, still wounded, still broken. I just wanted my things, some closure, and to leave the place that now felt tainted. I unlocked the front door, stepping inside, and the silence was thick, almost haunting. The house looked untouched since I had left. The decorations from her birthday party were still up, sagging and sad, like wilted flowers. The sight of them brought back flashes of that night, the horror and heartbreak etched on her face. I shook the images away, moving toward the bedroom where I had stashed a few boxes to pack. As I started putting my things in a box, I heard her soft footsteps behind me. Daniel, she said quietly, her voice carrying a fragility I hadn't heard before. I froze, not wanting to face her, but I turned around anyway. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, her face pale, eyes hollow. She held something in her hands, a small, folded letter. She took a hesitant step toward me and held it out. "What's this?" I asked, keeping my voice as steady as I could. It's a letter I wrote for you. I know you won't believe me, but I'm so sorry for everything. I know that probably doesn't mean anything to you now, but I can't live with this without at least trying to make it right. Please, just read it when you're ready. It's all I can give you." I looked at the letter, tempted to tear it apart, to refuse it altogether, but something in her tone made me take it. I slipped it into my pocket without a word, turning back to pack. She lingered in the doorway, watching me for a moment, and then I heard her walk away, her footsteps fading into the other room. When I was done, I carried the boxes to the door, took one last look around the house, and walked out without looking back. That night, after throwing my things into my car, I sat alone, the letter still weighing heavily in my pocket. Curiosity got the better of me, and I finally unfolded it, my hands trembling slightly as I read her words. "Dear Daniel. If you're reading this, I guess I have one last chance to explain, even if it doesn't change anything. I don't deserve it, I know, but I need you to understand why. I need you to know that it was never about love, because you are the only man I've ever truly loved. What I did was wrong, and it's haunted me every day since. When I met Nick, I was lost. I was trapped in a routine, caught up in pressures I couldn't shake. Our life had become predictable, and I felt like I was suffocating. I know it's not an excuse, I don't want to make excuses. I just want you to know that it wasn't about him. I never stopped loving you. I know it sounds selfish now, but I was afraid to lose you, afraid to tell you the truth and face the consequences. I am broken, Daniel. I know you can't forgive me, and I'll live with that. But I need you to know that if I could go back, if I could undo all the hurt I caused you, I would. I know I deserve this pain, but I wish I could take away yours. Please, remember the good times. You were my everything. You still are. Love, Sarah." I let the letter fall to my lap, my chest tightening. I wanted to hate her, to dismiss her words as nothing more than another manipulation, but they felt real, sincere. I sat with that feeling, letting the sadness swell within me until it became too much to bear. I finally let the tears fall, mourning not just the betrayal but the love we had lost, a love I had thought would last forever. Over the following months, I kept my distance. I buried myself in work, meeting up with friends when I could manage it, but mostly drifting through the days in a numb haze. I told myself I was healing, that time would dull the ache, that one day I'd move on. But every once in a while, I'd pull out that letter, reading her words, wondering how it had all gone so wrong. Months turned into a year, and I began seeing someone new, a kind woman named Emma who knew nothing of my past. She was gentle and patient, and being with her helped me feel alive again, to see a future beyond the pain. But in quiet moments, memories of Sarah would creep in, haunting me. I couldn't shake the feeling of unfinished business, the lingering sadness of a love that had ended too soon. One evening, after a quiet dinner, Emma and I were watching a movie when my phone buzzed. I checked it casually, only for my heart to stop at the sight of the name. It was Sarah's mother. I excused myself and answered, my stomach twisting. Her mother's voice was trembling, and the words that followed shattered me in a way I hadn't anticipated. "Daniel. I didn't know who else to call. Sarah, she's gone. She took her own life." The world went still. I sank into a chair, struggling to breathe as the weight of her words settled over me. "We found a letter," her mother continued, choking back tears. She wrote about you. She said she was sorry, that she couldn't live with what she'd done. That she never stopped loving you." I couldn't speak, couldn't think. Memories of Sarah flooded my mind, the laughter, the dreams we had shared, the love we'd once felt. And beneath it all was the ache, the sharp, searing pain of knowing that her last moments were spent alone, haunted by the mistakes she couldn't undo. In the end, there was no comfort, no sense of closure. Only the tragic weight of a broken love, a shattered life, and the lingering question of what might have been if things had been different. As I sat there, my heart breaking all over again, I realized that revenge hadn't freed me from the pain. It had only deepened it, tying me forever to a love lost, to a memory that would haunt me for the rest of my life.